Okay, so it's the middle of the night and I can't sleep, so I figured I would film my labor and delivery video. This is my 4th attempt at filming this, so let's hope that this time goes correctly. It was the night of September 6th at around 11 p.m. and I ate some food and went to sleep, and then a while later I woke up and I was really nauseous. I could taste puke at the back of my throat. I was like, oh my god, I'm going to throw up. So I went in the bathroom and I just sat in here for a few minutes, and then I was like, I feel weird. Something doesn't feel right. I feel weird. So I told Tyler, I was like, I think I should go to the emergency room just to make sure I'm not in labor or nothing's wrong or anything like that. So we went to the emergency room, and after they checked me in and took my blood pressure and all of that stuff, they took me up to the OB floor and hooked me up to the baby monitors where they monitor the contractions and the baby's heartbeat. And they checked me, and I was 1.5 centimeters dilated. So after a while, they told me to get up and walk around for a while to see if that would help progress, get the contractions more regular, because at that point they were irregular, weak, it wasn't painful. So Tyler and I walked around the hospital for about 15 minutes. Then we came back and she checked me again. She said, you're about 1.5 to 2 centimeters dilated, and you're still having contractions, but they're irregular. So you can go home at this point, or if you don't feel comfortable going home, you can stay here and we'll just keep monitoring you through the night and see what we should do in the morning. And at first I said, well, I want to go home. I'm not really progressing. I'm not in pain. And I feel like I'm not in active labor, so I should probably go home. But ultimately I did decide to stay because I didn't want to go home and then it just start progressing quickly and I would just freak out because I was supposed to give birth in Nashville. So they needed enough time to get me to Nashville. So I didn't want to go home and then progress quickly and then them not be able to get me where I should be. Because they wanted her to be induced in Vanderbilt on the 13th of September. Because of just the holes in her heart and her club feet and what was wrong with her hands. So they just wanted to be safe and have her up there with the NICU team just in case anything went wrong. Just to keep an eye on her. They just wanted to be on the safe side. So I stayed overnight, and then that morning we let my parents and Tyler's mom know we're in the hospital. We might be in labor. We don't know yet. I'd kind of been talking to my sister the night before, and I told her, but I told her don't wake our parents up because right now it's not a big deal. So my OB came in that morning and checked me, and I was 3 centimeters dilated. So they decided to send me to Vanderbilt. So, at this point, it was the morning of September 7th. So Tyler and his mom went back to mine and Tyler's house to get my hospital bag, her diaper bag, her car seat, and everything like that. And then my parents went back to their house to get some stuff like chargers and anything like that. And then they gave me a little bit of morphine and then transported me by ambulance to Vanderbilt. I got there and I got put in a triage room. And that's basically where you stay until they decide do they want to discharge me or admit me into a labor and delivery room. So I stayed there, and everyone that was on their way got there, and people were taking turns coming in because I think only 2 people could be in the room with me at a time. And so when I got there, they checked me, and they said I was 3 centimeters dilated and 70% effaced. And I can't remember how long it was, but for a while I got there first because the ambulance was the first to get there and I rode by myself. So after a while everyone else got there and they had me hooked up and they said I was having contractions, but they were irregular and they were starting to slow down and become weaker. So they said, well, we're going to check you in a little bit, and if you haven't progressed, then we're going to send you home because that means you're not really in active labor. But if you have progressed, they were going to move you to your room. And I said, okay. And I was so excited. I was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to have our baby. I'm so excited. And then after a while, they came in, checked me, and I hadn't progressed. I was still 3 centimeters dilated, and I was still 70% effaced. So they were talking. They were like, we're pretty sure we're going to send you home because you're not in active labor. So we're just going to go ahead and send you home. And at that point, I was so devastated because I was so sure that she was coming. I was so happy, and it just broke my heart, and I got so upset. and I don't know if I genuinely didn't feel good or if it was just the stress of going through all of this to just be sent home. I was so hot and tired, and I felt horrible. So they brought in a wet washcloth for me because I was just sweating so much. I don't know how a person can sweat that much, and I don't know why. I guess I was just overwhelmed with already going through all of this with the hospital stay and the ambulance and going to Nashville and getting hooked up and everything, and then being told that I wasn't in labor and that I was being sent home. So they decided that they wanted to do an EKG on me just to make sure everything was okay because I wasn't feeling good. They took some blood to check my electrolytes, and they were going to do an EKG. Well, the EKG came back abnormal. So they came in and they said, if you want to go home, you can. But if you want to, we can induce you. And at that point, I was over the moon. I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm having this baby. So I was like, of course, I'm going to stay. I'm ready for this. So they said, okay. So after a while, I got transported to my labor and delivery room, and they asked if I wanted a wheelchair, if I could walk, or if I could walk. I said, yeah, I can walk. I'm fine. I'm not in any pain yet. And I was walking, and I felt this just gush. It wasn't a huge gush like my water breaking. It was just like this small gush, and I was like, what just happened? Like, I looked on the floor expecting to see that my water had broken, but I didn't see anything, so I was walking down the hall, following the nurse, and I was like, I don't know what just happened, but it feels so weird. And I told the nurse, and she said, oh, it's probably from where they've checked you for dilation, because they use lubrication to check, and she said that it was probably just all of the lubrication that was used to check, because I was checked quite a few times. So she said that's probably what it is, but when you get to your room, you can go into the bathroom and clean yourself up before we hook you up. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I got to my room, and I went into the bathroom, and I walked, and there was this huge, it was like this big of just like a blood clot. It was disgusting. I was like, okay, I think that is my mucus plug. And I'm guessing that it came out because where they were checking me so much. I'm not sure. But they got me into bed and they checked me, and I had actually progressed to 4 centimeters. And so they asked, well, when do you want your epidural? And I said, as soon as possible, because I didn't want to be focused on the pain. I wanted to focus on getting my daughter here and safe. And from what I've heard, the amount of pain that you're in, I can't even imagine doing it without an epidural. So the people who do it without an epidural are so amazing. So an anesthesiologist came in and just kind of talked to me about the epidural and the risks and everything. And after a while, they came in and they did the epidural, and to me, that was one of the worst parts. Not because the needle hurt, but because you have to sit with your legs dangling off the bed, and you have to lean forward to kind of like arch your back. And when I would lean forward, Juliet would jam up into my ribs, and I couldn't breathe, and it was a horrible pain, and I was close to tears, not because of the needle, but because of having to lean forward and push her into my ribs like that. It was tremendously painful, and it actually took 3 different tries to get the epidural right. The first 2 times, they accidentally put it into a blood vessel, so when they would inject the medicine, it would make me feel really lightheaded and fuzzy and faint, and I would feel just so sick. And then they did that the first 2 times. And then the 3rd time they said, your back has a lot of blood vessels, so we're going to put it in a different spot in your back. And then they wound up accidentally getting it into the epidural space, which is where it's mainly put. So they got that done. And then they put in my catheter. And they put the catheter in before I was numb. So that was uncomfortable and painful. But I finally went numb, and I slept. I slept so much. I'm so glad that I got that much sleep before I had her. Well, they hooked me up to the Pitocin, And then I waited overnight, and then the morning of September 8th, they noticed that the Pitocin wasn't really working, and they had it all the way up to the highest dose that they could give. So they decided to switch out the bags. And something happened. I don't know if the first bag was a bad batch, if the second bag was a bad batch, but when they hooked me up to the second bag of Pitocin, they thought that changing the bag might help. I don't know, I'm not exactly sure what happened. Either one of the bags was a bad batch. I think this is what I think would happen, but don't take my word for it because this part is really fuzzy because I was beyond tired. I was half asleep when this happened. I think that the first bag was a bad batch and they had it on the highest dose. So then when they switched to the second bag, the nurse didn't turn the dose back down. So the second bag was good. So right off the bat, I got the highest dose of Pitocin, and it started giving me like fast, intense contractions. I couldn't feel them. I had no idea I was having contractions, but the nurse came back in and she said, "You're not going to believe this, but it worked." And I started having just contraction after contraction after contraction, and it was making the baby's heart rate go down into like the 50s. So all of a sudden, like 20 doctors rushed in, and everyone was just talking at once, and they were saying something about an emergency C-section, and someone was reading me about the risks of C-section and asking me if I agree and all of this stuff, and then before I knew it, I was in an operating room. And they gave me oxygen, the thing that goes around in your nose, and gave me a strong dose of the epidural medicine. And they said, "We're actually going to wait a few minutes because it seems like she's stabilizing. And if she stabilizes, then we can take you back to your room and we won't have to do a C-section." I said, "Okay." So we sat there for about 5 minutes. She stabilized. We were both okay. So they brought me back to my room. And then at that point, it was just a waiting game. They would come in and check me. I was progressing great. And then before I knew it, I was 10 centimeters dilated. And all they needed to do was get her down a little bit lower. So they had me lay in this weird position. And the nurse was saying that it was going to be uncomfortable, but really, I found it really comfortable. I had to like lay on my side, kind of, prop one of my legs up kind of bent, and then the other one was straight. And she said it was probably going to be uncomfortable, but I probably could have fallen asleep laying like that. And then my legs were completely numb, especially my right one. I mean, it was just like a piece of wood. It was so numb. I couldn't lift it. I couldn't do anything. Both of my legs were numb, but my right one was way more affected. And then I felt a lot of pressure down in my vagina, and I started feeling the contractions in my lower left pelvis and my lower left back. I guess the epidural wore off right there. So every contraction I was just feeling an intense amount of pain in just those two little spots, and it was mind-blowingly painful. Anyways, so I started feeling intense pressure down there. And so I said, I feel a lot of pressure. So they got me up in the stirrups and they said, "Okay, we're going to do practice push." I said, "Okay." So I did a practice push and she said, "Okay, let's get the doctor in here. You're about to have this baby." And I started pushing. I pushed for about 15 to 20 minutes, and at 3:17 p.m. on September 8th, 2015, Juliet was born. She was 5 pounds, 9 ounces, and she was 18 inches long. And when she came out, they laid her on me, and the first thing she did was pee all over me. I knew it was the start to a great relationship, so that was fun. And I did have to have an episiotomy, so afterwards they sewed me up while they were getting her all situated. I got the cord cut and all of that, and then I got to hold her, and we did skin to skin, and it was a beautiful moment. It was the best moment of my life, really. So that is my labor and delivery story. The Next video that I'll talk about is probably her NICU days, because she was sent to the NICU when she was a day old. So I will record and upload that one, hopefully soon, and just look forward to it. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry it's long, but it's a great story.